"Don't worry, he won't bite," assured the human to the frightened alien girl. The ancient hall's crystalline lights cast an ethereal glow across Christian Bell's polished chest plate as he strode through the massive archway, his footsteps echoing off the weathered stone pillars. Behind him, padding silently on massive paws, came Frost, a creature that would have sent most xenobiologists into fits of academic ecstasy. The beast was a marvel of evolution, 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with thick, bluish-white fur marked by striking black stripes. Its massive head bore a resemblance to both feline and draconic ancestors, complete with gleaming red eyes and impressive fangs. Despite its fearsome appearance, the creature moved with a fluid grace that belied its size. Christian adjusted the package secured to his tactical belt, his fingers brushing against the smooth metal surface. The delivery was simple enough, a standard courier job to an outlying colony world. What made it interesting was the client. He spotted her immediately. The humanoid alien female stood near one of the towering pillars, her silvery skin catching the azure light in a way that made her seem to glow. Her snow-white hair cascaded down her back in a straight curtain, contrasting beautifully with her form-fitting metallic attire. The outfit left little to the imagination, while somehow maintaining an air of elegance. Their eyes met across the chamber, his warm brown meeting her startling golden ones. And for a moment, time seemed to pause. Then Frost moved forward, and the spell was broken. The alien woman's eyes widened in terror, her body tensing as she pressed herself against the ancient pillar. The intricate patterns etched into her revealing outfit shimmed with her rapid breathing. "Easy there," Christian said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. "Don't worry, he won't bite." Her gaze darted between Christian and Frost, uncertainty evident in her expression. That is your companion?" Her voice was melodious, with an accent that made standard English sound like poetry. "This is Frost," Christian confirmed, patting the beast's massive shoulder. "He's a sweetheart, really. Would you like to meet him properly?" She hesitated, her delicate fingers tracing nervous patterns on the pillar behind her. I have never seen such a creature." "Most haven't," Christian smiled, his short beard and mustache framing the expression perfectly. "He's one of a kind. Come on, I'll show you he's perfectly safe." As if understanding the conversation, Frost lowered his massive head and let out a rumbling purr that seemed to vibrate through the ancient chamber. The sound was surprisingly gentle, almost coaxing. The alien woman took a tentative step forward, then another. Her movements were graceful, despite her obvious apprehension. "You are certain?" "Absolutely," Christian assured her. "I'm Christian Bell, by the way, and you must be Lady Anira." She nodded, now close enough that Christian could see the subtle patterns in her silvery skin, like starlight captured in flesh. "I am." Another step brought her within arm's reach of Frost. The beast remained perfectly still, red eyes half closed in contentment as he continued his soothing purr. Slowly, Anira reached out, her slender fingers hovering just above Frost's fur. "Go ahead," Christian encouraged. "He loves being petted." Her fingers sank into the thick fur, and a look of wonder crossed her face. "So soft," she breathed, "like touching a cloud." Christian watched as the tension gradually left her body, replaced by genuine curiosity as she explored Frost's fur. The beast, for his part, seemed to be thoroughly enjoying the attention. "See? Nothing to worry about," Christian said, enjoying the way her golden eyes lit up with delight. "Now, about that package." Christian reached for the package, but Anira's next word stopped him. "Perhaps we should discuss the details somewhere more private?" Her golden eyes darted meaningfully toward the shadowed recesses of the hall. Smart girl, Christian thought. Public spaces, no matter how ancient and seemingly abandoned, had a way of growing unexpected ears. "Lead the way, my lady." Anira guided them through a series of smaller chambers, each more intricately decorated than the last. The walls bore reliefs depicting what appeared to be historical events, battles, coronations, and stranger scenes Christian couldn't begin to interpret. Frost's massive form padded silently behind them, his presence oddly reassuring in the ancient silence. They finally emerged into what appeared to be a private study. Modern furnishings contrasted sharply with the ancient architecture, creating an oddly appealing blend of old and new. Holographic displays flickered to life as they entered. bathing the room in a soft amber glow. "Much better," Anira said, settling gracefully onto a curved sofa. "Now we can speak freely." Christian remained standing, his tactical training making him prefer the mobility. "The package, he began, reaching for his belt. "Wait." Anira held up a delicate hand. "First I must know, how did you come by such a companion?" She gestured to Frost, who had settled into a relaxed crouch near the door, effectively blocking the only exit. "I have studied many Earth species, but nothing like him exists in any database." Christian's lips quirked into a half-smile. "That's because he's not from Earth. Found him as a cub on a mining operation gone wrong in the Carina Nebula. Someone had been running illegal genetic experiments, splicing various predator species together. When we shut them down, Frost was the only survivor." "And you kept him?" Anira's voice held a mix of surprise and something else. Approval? "Couldn't exactly leave him, could I?" Christian shrugged. "He was barely bigger than a house cat back then. Followed me around like a lost puppy. By the time anyone realized what he'd grow into, we were already bonded." Anira's expression softened. "You have a kind heart, Christian Bell. Don't spread it around," he winked. "Bad for a business." Finally, he unclipped the package from his belt. Speaking of business, the package was small, barely larger than his palm, its surface a seamless metallic sheen. Anira's eyes fixed on it with an intensity that made Christian's tactical instincts twitch. "The security codes?" she asked. Christian pulled out his comm unit, displaying the authentication sequence. Anira checked it against her own device, then nodded. "Everything appears to be in order." As she reached for the package, their fingers brushed. The contact sent a surprising tingle up Christian's arm, and from Anira's slight intake of breath, she felt it too. Their eyes met, and for a moment, that earlier connection sparked between them again. Frost chose that moment to let out a rumbling sound that might have been a laugh. "Quiet, you," Christian muttered, breaking the moment. But he was smiling. Anira cradled the package carefully. "You must have questions." "Plenty," Christian admitted, "but my job is delivery, not interrogation. And if I wish to volunteer information..." Christian studied her for a moment. Her posture was relaxed, but there was tension around her eyes. "I'd say you look like someone who could use a friendly ear." She smiled then, a genuine expression that transformed her already beautiful features into something breathtaking. "And are you offering to be that friendly ear, Christian Bell?" "Well, my next job isn't for another 3 days," he said casually. And I hear this world has some interesting sights." "Indeed it does." Anira stood, moving to a cabinet that seemed to materialize from the wall itself. "Perhaps we could discuss them over a drink. I have some excellent Centaurian brandy. Now that's an offer I rarely refuse." Christian finally allowed himself to relax slightly, taking a seat while maintaining a clear line of sight to the door. "Though I have to warn you, Earth humans have a pretty high tolerance." Anira's laugh was like crystal chimes. "Oh, Christian Bell, you have no idea what you're getting into." As she poured the drinks, Christian couldn't help but think she might be right about that. But something told him it would be worth finding out. The Centaurian brandy cast prismatic reflections across the study's ancient walls as Anira poured 2 generous measures. The liquid seemed to dance with inner fire, matching the growing warmth in Christian's chest as he watched her movements. Her silvery skin caught the light in mesmerizing ways, making it difficult to focus on anything else. "To unexpected meetings," Anira proposed, offering him a crystal glass. "And interesting packages," Christian added with a knowing smile, accepting the drink. Their fingers brushed again, in that same electric tingle passing between them. Frost had made himself comfortable near the door, his massive head resting on his paws, but his red eyes remained alert, watching the proceedings with what Christian could have sworn was amusement. The brandy was exceptional, smooth fire that spread warmth through his chest and made his head pleasantly light. Christian had sampled spirits from a dozen worlds, but this was something special. "This isn't just any Centaurian brandy, is it?" he asked, studying the swirling liquid. Anira's lips curved into a mysterious smile. "Very observant. This is from the private stock of the high houses, not something one finds in common markets. And how does a courier's contact come by such rare vintage? Perhaps I'm not just any contact." She settled onto the sofa beside him, close enough that he could feel the subtle heat radiating from her body. "Just as you're not just any courier." Christian raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" "Standard couriers don't travel with genetically engineered apex predators," she pointed out. "Nor do they carry quantum-locked packages with security protocols that would make a military AI blush." "Notice that, did you?" "I noticed many things, Christian Bell." Her golden eyes seemed to glow in the ambient light. "I notice how you chose the seat with the best tactical advantage, how your hand never strays far from your concealed weapon, how your companion positions himself to guard our only exit." Christian didn't deny it. "Professional habits." "Indeed." She took another sip of brandy. "Just as it's my professional habit to know exactly who I'm dealing with." Christian Bell, former Special Operations, decorated veteran of the Orion conflict, now operating as an independent contractor specializing in high-risk deliveries. He kept his expression neutral, but internally he was impressed. That information wasn't easy to come by. "You've done your homework. I had to be certain you were the right man for this job." Her voice dropped lower, taking on a husky quality that sent pleasant shivers down his spine. "The package you brought me, it's not what you think it is." "I never think anything about my packages," Christian said diplomatically, though his interest was piqued. "A wise policy." Anira shifted closer, her thigh brushing against his. "But in this case, I'm going to break protocol, because I need your help, Christian, and because something tells me you're a man who can be trusted." The comm unit at Christian's belt chose that moment to chime. He glanced at it, recognizing his employer's encryption signature. "Excuse me," he said, moving to check the message. The text was brief but concerning. "Package compromised. Terminate delivery. Extreme caution advised. Target is not what she seems." Christian's combat instincts kicked in, but he kept his posture relaxed. When he looked up, Anira was watching him intently. "That would be your employer," she said softly, "warning you about me." "Should I be worried?" She set down her glass and turned to face him fully. "Yes, but not for the reasons they think." Her hand came to rest on his chest, just above his heart. "What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about the current political landscape. The question is, do you trust your employer more than you trust your instincts?" Christian was acutely aware of her touch, of the way her eyes seemed to see right through his carefully maintained professional facade. The brandy had left him pleasantly warm, his usual sharp edges softened just enough to make him consider options he might normally dismiss. "My instincts," he said slowly, "are telling me several things right now. Some of them are even about the mission." A smile played at the corners of her mouth. "And the others?" Instead of answering, Christian reached up and caught her hand where it rested on his chest. Her skin was silk smooth and cool to the touch. Yet that electric connection between them seemed to intensify. "You're playing a dangerous game, Anira." "Life is dangerous," she countered, leaning closer. "The question is whether the reward is worth the risk." Their faces were inches apart now. Christian could see flecks of silver in her golden eyes, like stars in an alien sunset. "And what exactly is the reward in this scenario?" "That depends entirely on how much you're willing to risk." Her free hand came up to trace the line of his jaw, fingers brushing through his short beard. "I could tell you about the package, about how it contains evidence that could prevent an interstellar war, about how certain parties would rather that evidence never came to light." "Sounds complicated," Christian murmured, his own hand finding the small of her back, drawing her closer. "It is, but that conversation can wait." Her breath was sweet with brandy as it ghosted across his lips. "Right now, I'm more interested in simpler things." "Such as?" "Such as how long I've wanted to do this." The kiss was electric, sending sparks of pleasure racing through Christian's body. Anira's lips were cool at first, but quickly warmed under his. She tasted of brandy and stardust, exotic and intoxicating. Her fingers tangled in his hair as she pressed closer, molding her body against his with an eagerness that matched his own rising desire. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, Christian noticed that Frost had tactfully turned his massive head away, giving them what privacy he could while maintaining his guard position. "Well," Christian said, his voice rough with desire, "that certainly complicates things." Anira laughed softly, the sound like crystal wind chimes. "Oh, Christian Bell, you have no idea how complicated things are about to become." She stood holding out her hand. Come with me. There's something I need to show you. As Christian took her hand and let her lead him deeper into her private quarters, he knew he was probably walking into trouble. But with the taste of her still on his lips and the promise of both danger and pleasure ahead, he found he didn't much care. Sometimes, he reflected, the most rewarding missions were the ones that went completely off script. The twin suns of the alien world painted the ancient chamber in hues of gold and crimson as dawn broke. Christian awoke to find himself in an unfamiliar bed, the silken sheets cool against his skin. The events of the previous night flooded back. The brandy, the revelations, the way Anira had led him to her private chambers. He smiled at the memory of their passionate encounter, how her silvery skin had seemed to glow in the starlight that filtered through the chamber's crystalline windows. Their connection had been more than physical. There had been a meeting of souls, an understanding that transcended their different species. Anira wasn't beside him now, but he could hear her moving in the adjacent room. Frost's familiar rumble indicated his faithful companion had maintained his guard through the night, though he'd had the good grace to stay in the outer chamber. Christian stretched, his muscles pleasantly sore. The room itself was a marvel of alien architecture, with walls that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Constellations he didn't recognize were projected across the ceiling, creating an illusion of floating in deep space. "You're awake." Anira's voice drew his attention to the doorway. She wore a different outfit now, still form-fitting, but more practical, though no less striking. Her snow-white hair was gathered in an elegant twist, exposing the graceful curve of her neck. "Been up long?" Christian asked, admiring the way she moved as she approached. "My species requires less rest than humans," she said, perching on the edge of the bed. Her golden eyes held a mix of affection and something else. "Concern?" "We need to talk, Christian." "About the package?" "About everything." She reached out, tracing a pattern on his chest that made his skin tingle. "Last night was extraordinary, but it's complicated matters considerably." Christian caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "How so?" "Because I wasn't entirely honest with you." She didn't pull away, but her expression grew serious. "The package you delivered, it contains more than just evidence of political corruption. It contains the key to my people's survival." Christian sat up, instantly alert. "Explain." "My people, the Lumini, are dying. A genetic degradation that's been accelerating for generations. We've tried everything. Genetic engineering, artificial reproduction, even cloning. Nothing works." She paused, her free hand unconsciously moving to her abdomen. "But there's hope. Recent studies suggest that human DNA might be compatible with ours. More than compatible, it might be the key to our salvation." Understanding dawned. The package contains the results of decades of research, proof that humans and Lumini can successfully reproduce. But there are those who would rather see my race die out than dilute our bloodline with human genes. Christian processed this information, thinking back to his employer's warning message. "And you knew this when you requested me specifically for the delivery?" A faint blush colored her silvery cheeks. "I chose you because your genetic profile showed exceptional compatibility. Your military record and professional reputation were secondary considerations." He should have been angry at being manipulated. Instead, he found himself fascinated by the complexity of her plan. "So last night was both genuine and calculated," she admitted. "I desired you, Christian, deeply and truly. But I also hoped—" She placed his hand on her abdomen, and his eyes widened as he detected a subtle warmth, a faint energy he hadn't noticed before. "Already," he breathed, amazed at the implications. "My people conceive quickly when compatible. It's how we've survived this long." Her eyes searched his face anxiously. "Are you angry?" Christian was quiet for a long moment, considering everything. Finally, he smiled. "You know, most women just ask a guy out for coffee first." The tension broke as Anira laughed, the sound like music. "And would you have preferred that approach?" "Probably not," he admitted, pulling her closer. "I've never been much for conventional courtship." Their lips met in a tender kiss, different from the passionate ones they'd shared the night before. This was gentler, filled with understanding and growing affection. When they parted, Anira's expression was serious again. "There's more you need to know. The package wasn't just research data. It was a key to accessing ancient Lumini technology. Technology that could ensure the survival of both our peoples. Both? She nodded. The same genetic compatibility that allows us to reproduce also means humans are susceptible to the degradation affecting my people. It's happening more slowly, but it's already begun. In a few generations, Earth needs this information as much as your people too, Christian concluded. Yes, but there are powerful forces that want to keep our people separate. The warning you received, it came from those who profit from conflict between our species. Christian thought of his employer, of the lucrative contracts he'd been offered recently. Things were starting to make an alarming amount of sense. Frost chose that moment to enter, padding over to rest his massive head on the bed. His red eyes seemed to convey understanding as he looked between them. "Well," Christian said, scratching behind Frost's ears, "I guess this makes you family now, big guy." The beast rumbled contentedly, and Anira's eyes filled with wonder. "You're taking this remarkably well." "I'm adaptable. It's what humans do best." He grinned. "Besides, how many men can say they helped save 2 species before breakfast?" "Speaking of breakfast," Anira's expression turned mischievous as she moved closer, her body pressing against his. "My people have certain traditions regarding newly bonded pairs." "Do tell," Christian murmured, his hands finding her waist. "Perhaps it would be better if I showed you." This time when their lips met, it was with the knowledge of what they were to each other. Not just lovers, but partners in something far greater than themselves. As Anira's cool fingers traced patterns across his skin, Christian reflected that some missions had rewards far beyond their original parameters. The ancient facility's warning systems activated during their shared morning meal, bathing the chamber in pulsing crimson light. Christian was already moving before the first alarm sounded, his military training kicking in as he reached for his tactical gear. "Multiple ships entering orbit," Anira announced, her fingers dancing across a holographic display that materialized from her bracelet. "Military grade. Not friendly. How much time?" 20 minutes, maybe less." She was already moving, her lithe form graceful even in crisis. "There's something I need to access before we leave. The ancient archives. They contain crucial information about the genetic compatibility between our species." Christian nodded, checking his weapons while Frost padded over, fully alert. "Lead the way, but we make this quick." They moved swiftly through the ancient corridors, their footsteps echoing off walls that seemed to pulse with internal light. Anira's knowledge of the facility was impressive. She led them through hidden passages and secret doorways that wouldn't have been visible to the casual observer. "The archives are just ahead," she said, pausing at an intersection, "but there's something you should know first." Christian raised an eyebrow. "More surprises?" "The compatibility between our species isn't accidental." Her golden eyes met his. "The archives contain proof that humans and Lumini share a common ancestor. Our peoples were one, once, before the Great Diaspora. That's quite a revelation." Christian processed this information while keeping an eye on their surroundings, though it explains a few things about last night. A smile played at her lips despite the urgency of their situation. "Yes, our physical compatibility was rather remarkable." "Focus, you two," Christian muttered to himself, though he couldn't help returning her smile. The memory of their passionate encounter was still fresh, the way their bodies had fit together so perfectly, as if designed for each other. Now he knew why. The archive chamber was breathtaking. A vast circular room with walls of living crystal that seemed to contain galaxies. Anira moved to a central console, her fingers working quickly as displays of ancient text and diagrams appeared in the air around them. "The separation happened millennia ago," she explained as she worked. "A faction of our ancestors chose to modify themselves for space travel, becoming what would eventually be the Lumini. The others remained closer to their original form, eventually becoming modern humans. But something went wrong with the modifications," Christian guessed, keeping watch at the entrance while Frost prowled the perimeter. "Yes, the changes that allowed us to survive in space began to break down over generations. The only solution was to reintegrate human DNA, to return to our original form." Her hands paused over the console. "What we created between us last night, it's not just a child, Christian. It's a bridge between our peoples. A return to what we were meant to be." A distant explosion rocked the facility, sending dust cascading from the ancient ceiling. Frost growled, his red eyes fixed on the corridor outside. Time's up, Christian warned. Get what you need. Anira nodded, her movements becoming more urgent. Almost done. The data contains the complete genetic sequence we need, plus information about ancient Lumini technology that could protect both our peoples. Another explosion, closer this time. The crystal walls trembled, their internal galaxies swirling in agitation. Anira! Done? She stepped back from the console, a small crystal data core clutched in her hand. This contains everything we need. Christian was already moving toward her when the first energy blast struck the doorway. Frost roared, interposing his massive bulk between them and the entrance as armed figures in black combat suits began pouring in. The other exit! Anira grabbed Christian's hand, pulling him toward a previously hidden doorway that had materialized in the crystal wall. Quickly! They ran, Frost bringing up the rear with surprising speed for his size. The passage led them through a series of increasingly ancient chambers, each more fantastic than the last. Energy blasts followed them, scorching the walls where they struck. The landing pad is just ahead, Anira gasped as they emerged onto a high platform overlooking a misty chasm. My ship is cloaked and ready. A blast struck near Christian's feet, forcing him to dive and roll. As he came up, he saw more troops emerging from other exits onto the platform. We're surrounded, he announced, drawing his weapon. Anira pressed against his back, her body warm and familiar. Trust me? Always. Then jump. Before he could question her, Anira had wrapped her arms around him and launched them both off the platform. Frost, displaying complete faith in his human companion, leaped after them without hesitation. They fell for what seemed like an eternity, the wind whipping past them. Then suddenly they were inside a ship's cabin, artificial gravity catching them gently as the cloaking field rippled around them. Neat trick, Christian said, helping Anira to her feet as Frost shook himself, seemingly unperturbed by their dramatic escape. Lumini technology, she grinned, moving to the ship's controls. The same principles that allowed our ancestors to survive in space. As the ship rocketed away from the facility, cloaking field protecting them from pursuit, Christian watched the woman who had so thoroughly upended his life in less than a day. Her silver skin was flushed with excitement, her golden eyes bright with triumph, and something else. Something that made his heart race. Come here, he said softly. She engaged the autopilot and moved into his arms willingly. Their kiss was electric, charged with adrenaline and growing affection. Her cool fingers found their way under his tactical vest as his hands traced the curves of her body through her form-fitting outfit. We should probably focus on escaping, she murmured against his lips, though she made no move to pull away. Probably, he agreed, trailing kisses down her neck, but I've always been good at multitasking. Frost huffed and deliberately turned away, finding a comfortable spot in the cargo area where he could pretend not to notice their activities. As they left the planet's atmosphere, their passionate embrace was illuminated by the light of distant stars, the same stars their ancestors had traveled together before their paths diverged. Now, through their love and the child they had created, those paths were joining once again. The future was uncertain, full of dangers and challenges, but as Christian held Anira close, feeling the subtle warmth of new life growing within her, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The vast expanse of space stretched before them as Anira's ship glided silently through the void, its cloaking technology keeping them hidden from pursuing vessels. Christian stood at the viewport, watching distant stars streak by, while Anira worked at the navigation console, her graceful fingers dancing across holographic controls. We have allies waiting in the Proxima system, she said, glancing up at him. A coalition of progressive Lumini and human scientists who've been working together in secret. Christian moved behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. She leaned back into his touch, a soft sigh escaping her lips. Your people's leadership doesn't know about this coalition. The High Council would never officially sanction it. They're too proud to admit we need help. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining. But there are those who see the truth, that our future lies in reunification. Frost patted over, his massive head coming to rest on the console as he watched the star map with intelligent interest. The beast had proven remarkably adaptable to space travel, as if something in his engineered genetics made him perfectly suited for it. And what about Earth's government? Christian asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. There are sympathetic factions, but the majority view any genetic tampering as a threat to human purity. She turned in her chair to face him, her golden eyes serious. Which is ironic, considering humans are already changing. The same genetic markers that made you compatible with me are becoming more common in the human population. Evolution pushing us back together? He smiled, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. Nature finds a way, she murmured, pressing against him. Just as we did. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, her cool skin warming under his touch. Every time they came together, it felt more right, more natural, as if their bodies were remembering an ancient connection. A warning chime from the console interrupted them. Anira pulled away reluctantly, checking the display. 3 ships just dropped out of hyperspace ahead of us. Military configuration. Hostile? Unknown. They're broadcasting on an old frequency. Her eyes widened. It's the Coalition's recognition signal. Christian moved to the weapon station, just in case. Can they be trusted? The signal includes genetic verification codes. They're legitimate. She opened a communication channel. This is Anira of House Luminari, requesting sanctuary. A holographic image appeared above the console, a distinguished-looking human man with silver hair and sharp features. Lady Luminari, I am Dr. Richard Chamson. We've been expecting you. His eyes moved to Christian. Though your companion is a surprise, he's more than a companion, Anira said firmly. He's the father of my child. Chamson's eyebrows rose, but his expression was one of fascination rather than disapproval. A natural conception. Remarkable. Our research suggested it was possible, but to have actual proof? We have more than proof, Christian interjected. We have the complete genetic archives from the ancient facility. Then you must come aboard immediately. Our sensors detect multiple pursuit vessels entering the system. Anira guided their ship toward the largest of the Coalition vessels. A sleek research ship that somehow managed to combine both human and Lumini design aesthetics. As they docked, Christian couldn't help but admire the elegant efficiency of it. The Coalition's welcome party was a mix of humans and Lumina, all wearing similar uniforms that emphasized unity rather than division. Frost drew surprised looks but no fear. These people were apparently used to genetic engineering. Welcome to the Phoenix, Dr. Chamson greeted them personally, one of the few places in the galaxy where our peoples work together openly. As they were led through the ship, Christian noticed subtle signs of integration everywhere. Human and Lumini script on displays. Environmental controls adjusted to suit both species. Even the food synthesizers offering cuisine from both cultures. How long has this been going on? He asked Chamson. Officially, this project doesn't exist. Unofficially, we've been working toward reunification for decades. The doctor's expression grew serious. But time is running out. The genetic degradation in both our species is accelerating. They arrived at a medical bay that looked more like a luxury suite. We'd like to examine both of you, if you're willing. Your successful conception could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for. Anira squeezed Christian's hand. We're willing, but first we need assurances. There are powerful people trying to stop this from happening. Of course, Chamson nodded to a Lumini security team. We've already detected 3 separate attack groups converging on our position. But don't worry, the Phoenix has some surprises for uninvited guests. As if to emphasize his point, the ship's massive engines hummed to life, and Christian felt the subtle shift of acceleration. Through the bay's viewport, he watched as they smoothly entered hyperspace, leaving their pursuers behind. You'll be safe here, Chamson assured them. Now shall we begin the examination? The next few hours were a blur of tests and scans, though Chamson's team was remarkably considerate of their comfort. They were allowed to stay together throughout the process, and Frost was permitted to maintain his protective vigil. The results are extraordinary, Chamson announced finally, displaying a holographic representation of their combined genetic structure. Your union hasn't just produced viable offspring, it's actually stabilizing the degradation in both your genetic codes. The child you're carrying could be the key to saving both our species. Anira, resting against Christian on the examination couch, smiled. So our ancestors knew what they were doing after all. Perhaps they foresaw this moment, Chamson mused. A time when their divided children would find each other again. A gentle alarm sounded when a Lumini scientist entered with new data. "Doctor, you need to see this. The genetic archives they recovered, they contain more than just historical data. They're instructions." Instructions for what? For activating something called the Genesis Protocol. It appears to be some kind of large-scale genetic restoration program left behind by our ancestors. Chamson's eyes lit up with excitement. This could be it, the solution we've been searching for. But we'll need help to implement something of this scale. Political support, resources. You'll have it, Anira said confidently. Once word gets out about successful human Lumini conception, others will come forward. We can't be the only ones. Christian pulled her closer, his hand resting protectively over their growing child. And those who try to stop us will find themselves facing both our peoples, Chamson said firmly. The time for separation is over. Our future lies in unity. Later, in their private quarters aboard the Phoenix, Christian and Anira stood at the viewport, watching the swirling colors of hyperspace. Her back was pressed against his chest, his arms wrapped around her waist, their reflection ghostly in the transparent metal. "Scared?" he asked softly. "No." She turned in his arms, her golden eyes meeting his. "For the first time in my life, I feel complete. Like everything that led us here, even my initial fear of Frost, was part of some greater design." Speaking of Frost, they both looked at the massive beast, who had made himself comfortable on a specially provided cushion. He opened one red eye and rumbled contentedly. "I think he knew before we did," Anira laughed, "that we belonged together." "Smart boy," Christian kissed her then, slow and deep, feeling the familiar electricity build between them. As her cool fingers slipped beneath his shirt, he smiled against her lips. "You know, Chamson said we should rest." "I can think of better ways to spend our time," she murmured, pulling him toward the bed. As they came together once again, their passion illuminated by the shifting lights of hyperspace, both knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not just as lovers, but as living proof that their peoples were always meant to be one. The Phoenix's medical bay was awash in soft ambient light as Anira lay on the examination table, her swollen belly prominent under the diagnostic scanner. Christian stood beside her, their fingers intertwined, while Frost maintained his vigilant watch by the door. "The baby's development is remarkable," Dr. Chamson announced, studying the holographic display. "A perfect fusion of human and Lumini genetics, and the accelerated growth rate is completely normal for a hybrid pregnancy. 3 months instead of 9, Anira smiled, squeezing Christian's hand. "Our son will be here soon." "Have you chosen a name?" Chamson asked, adjusting the scanner settings. "Lyrian," Anira replied softly. "It means bridge between stars in ancient Lumini." Christian grinned. "Appropriate for the first natural-born hybrid who'll help unite our peoples." Their moment of peace was shattered by a sudden security alert. Red warning lights pulsed through the medical bay as Frost leaped to his feet, hackles raised. "Multiple hostile vessels approaching," the ship's AI announced. "Shields failing. Security breach detected in Section 7. Chamson's face went pale. "Impossible. Our location is classified. Unless ... a traitor," Christian finished, already reaching for his weapon. "Someone transmitted our position." Anira struggled to sit up, her golden eyes flashing with determination. "We need to reach the secure command center. The Genesis protocol data ... is already being accessed," a new voice interrupted. They turned to see Dr. Ven, one of the Lumini scientists, standing in the doorway with a neural disruptor aimed at them. "Really, Lady Luminary? Did you think the High Council wouldn't have contingencies in place?" Frost growled menacingly, but Ven held up a small device. Nah. This neural inhibitor is calibrated specifically for genetically engineered creatures. One push, and your beast falls." Christian shifted slightly, positioning himself between Ven and Anira. "The Council would rather see both our species die out than admit they were wrong." "Wrong!" Ven laughed bitterly. "We are the pinnacle of evolution. This mongrelization you propose would destroy everything we've achieved." "You mean everything you've lost?" Anira countered, her hand protectively covering her belly. "Our people are dying, Ven. The genetic degradation can be solved through proper engineering, not by crawling back to our primitive roots." Ven's face contorted with disgust. That abomination you carry is an affront to nature. The only affront to nature is denying what we truly are, Chamson spoke up, slowly moving toward a console. Our ancestors are dead, Ven snapped, and their grand design died with them. The High Council will... He never finished the sentence. Frost, displaying the intelligence that made him unique, had been inching forward imperceptibly during the exchange. The moment Ven's attention wavered, the beast struck. The neural inhibitor clattered to the floor as Frost's massive paw sent Ven sprawling. The disruptor discharged harmlessly into the ceiling as Christian tackled the traitor, quickly subduing him. The ships, Anira gasped suddenly, doubling over. They're boarding. That's not all that's happening, Chamson observed, checking the medical scanner. The stress has triggered labor. Christian's head snapped up. Now? Your son seems to have inherited your timing, Chamson smiled grimly. We need to get to the secure medical facility 2 decks down. It's hardened against attack. Frost dragged the unconscious Ven into a storage compartment, which Chamson quickly sealed. The corridor outside was chaos. Crew members running to battle stations as alarm klaxons blared. This way, Chamson led them through a maintenance passage, avoiding the main corridors where fighting had already broken out. Christian supported Anira, who moved with remarkable grace despite her condition. They reached the secure facility just as another contraction hit. The reinforced doors sealed behind them as Chamson and his trusted medical team began preparing for the birth. The coalition forces are holding the borders back, Chamson reported, checking a security feed. But we need to hurry. How are you feeling, my dear? Like I'm about to make history, Anira managed through gritted teeth. Her golden eyes found Christian. Stay with me? Always. He took her hand, marveling at how cool her skin remained despite her exertion. Remember how we met? You were terrified of Frost. She laughed, then gasped as another contraction hit. And you promised he wouldn't bite, though he certainly proved useful today. Frost rumbled in agreement from his position guarding the door, his red eyes alert for any threat to his expanding family. The next hour was a blur of activity. Outside, the sounds of battle gradually faded as coalition forces repelled the boarding parties. Inside, a more personal battle was being fought as Anira brought their son into the universe. Finally, a new sound filled the secure facility, the strong cry of a healthy baby boy. Chamson held him up triumphantly, and everyone in the room gasped. The child was beautiful, his skin a pale silver like his mother's, but with a warmth that seemed to glow from within. Tufts of light brown hair like his father's crowned his head, and when he opened his eyes, they were a stunning mix of human brown and luminy gold. Lyrian, Anira breathed as Chamson placed the baby in her arms. Our bridge between stars. Christian felt his throat tighten with emotion as he looked at his son. The boy's tiny hand gripped his finger with surprising strength, and in that moment, he understood completely why their ancestors had chosen to separate. They had known their descendants would need to choose to come together again, to overcome fear and prejudice, to forge something new and beautiful. Frost patted over silently, his massive head lowering to gently nuzzle the baby. Lyrian reached out fearlessly, tiny fingers tangling in the beast's fur. Like father, like son, Anira smiled. No fear. He'll need that courage, Chamson said, checking the security feeds. The High Council ships are retreating, but they'll be back, and Earth's government will react once word of this spreads. Let them come, Christian said firmly, sitting on the bed and pulling Anira and Lyrian close. Our son represents the future, not just for our families or our peoples, but for all of us, and we'll fight to protect that future. Anira turned her face up to his, and their lips met in a tender kiss. Despite her exhaustion, he could feel her passion, her joy, her love. We should rest while we can, she murmured against his lips. Something tells me our adventures are just beginning. As if in agreement, Lyrian made a soft cooing sound, his tiny hand still firmly gripped in Frost's fur. The massive beast had shifted to form a protective barrier around the bed, his presence both guardian and family member. Looking at them, his fierce, beautiful alien wife, their miraculous son, and in their loyal companion, Christian knew he'd never been happier. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together as a family, and anyone who tried to harm them would learn why humans had earned their reputation as the most determined fighters in the galaxy. 1 year after Lyrian's birth, Christian stood at the grand window of the Unity Station's diplomatic chamber, watching Earth rise over the lunar horizon. The magnificent view served as backdrop to perhaps the most significant political gathering in human history. Anira approached from behind, sliding her arms around his waist. Her silvery skin glowed in Earth's reflected light. Her form-fitting diplomatic attire somehow managing to be both elegant and alluring. Nervous? About addressing the combined councils of Earth and Lumini? Not at all, he chuckled, turning to embrace her. I've only got the future of both our species riding on my charm. Then we're in good hands. She kissed him playfully, her cool lips sending familiar shivers down his spine. Your charm worked on me, after all. As I recall, Frost did most of the work there. On cue, their massive companion raised his head from where he lounged near the chamber's entrance, Lyrian happily using him as a climbing frame. The boy, though only a year old, already showed the accelerated development typical of Lumini children, combined with human adaptability. His silver-toned skin had his mother's ethereal glow, while his brown-gold eyes and light brown hair marked his human heritage. Careful, little star, Anira called as Lyrian scrambled up Frost's back. The beast remained perfectly still, red eyes watchful but peaceful. He's fine, Christian assured her. Frost's probably the safest playground in the galaxy. Their domestic moment was interrupted by Dr. Chamson's arrival. The scientist's expression was cautiously optimistic. They're ready for you. Christian straightened his formal uniform, a new design that incorporated both human and Lumini elements. How's the audience looking? The Earth delegation is primarily positive, especially after the latest genetic reports. The Lumini, Chamson hesitated, are being Lumini, proud and stubborn, Anira sighed, but even they can't deny the evidence anymore. The evidence was indeed overwhelming. In the year since Lyrian's birth, the Genesis Protocol had been partially activated, already showing promising results in both populations. More importantly, other human Lumini couples had begun emerging from hiding, proving that their union wasn't unique. Ready, Weshir? Christian asked, offering his arm to Anira. She gathered Lyrian, who came willingly, already showing an uncanny awareness of important moments. Frost fell into step beside them as they entered the Grand Council chamber. The room was divided into two sections. Earth's representatives on one side, the Lumini High Council on the other. The contrast was striking. Earth's delegation in their varied military and civilian attire, the Lumini in their flowing ethereal robes. Christian took his position at the central podium, Anira at his side with Lyrian in her arms. Frost sat regally behind them, his massive presence adding weight to their presentation. Distinguished representatives of Earth and Lumini, Christian began, his voice carrying naturally through the chamber. 1 year ago, I was a simple courier, tasked with delivering a package. Instead, I delivered hope. He gestured to his family. Look at my son. Really look at him. He's not just a hybrid of our species. He's proof of what we were always meant to be. The genetic degradation affecting both our peoples isn't a disease. It's a message from our ancestors. A reminder that we were never meant to remain separate. Murmurs rippled through both delegations. Christian continued, drawing on everything that made humans remarkable. Their passion, their determination, their ability to face the unknown with courage. The Genesis Protocol isn't just a cure, it's a reunion plan, left behind by those who knew this day would come. They trusted us to overcome our fears, our prejudices, our pride. They trusted us to find each other again. Anira stepped forward, her golden eyes scanning the chamber. The Lumini sought perfection in isolation, forgetting that true perfection lies in unity. Humans kept their adaptability but lost connection to their full potential. Apart, we're incomplete. Together. Together, Christian took her hand, we're unstoppable. Lyrian chose that moment to reach out toward the Lumini High Council, his small hand glowing with a soft light, a trait neither species had displayed for generations. The chamber fell silent in awe. The Earth's chief representative stood first. The evidence is clear. Genetic analysis confirms that continued separation will lead to extinction within 10 generations. The Genesis Protocol offers our only hope. The Lumini High Chancellor rose more slowly, pride warring with pragmatism on his ethereal features. Our ancestors' wisdom cannot be denied, Perhaps, perhaps it is time to remember what we once were, what we could be again. The vote that followed was unanimous. A full implementation of the Genesis Protocol, and with it, the gradual reunification of their species. Later, in their private quarters aboard Unity Station, Christian watched Anira put Lyrian to bed. Frost curled protectively nearby. The sight filled him with a contentment he'd never known possible. "You know," Anira said, joining him by the viewport, "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For that first moment when I was terrified of Frost. You didn't dismiss my fear. You helped me overcome it." She pressed against him suggestively. "You showed me that sometimes the things we fear most turn out to be exactly what we need." Christian pulled her close, desire kindling between them as it had since that first night. "I seem to recall you overcoming quite a few fears after that." She murmured against his lips. "Care to help me overcome a few more?" Their passionate embrace was interrupted by Frost's amused rumble. The beast had risen and was deliberately turning his back, giving them privacy while maintaining his guard. "Some things never change," Christian laughed, lifting Anira into his arms. "Come on, my fearless alien wife. Let's celebrate unity in our own special way." As they came together, Earth rising behind them and their son sleeping peacefully nearby, both knew that this was more than just their happy ending. It was humanity's new beginning, a future where fear gave way to trust, division yielded to unity, and love proved stronger than the vast distances between stars.